Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. Sorry, I've had a little hiatus from the recordings. Life has been very busy. I'm definitely looking to upgrade the visual aspect of this journey. So please bear with me for now, at least for the next month or so. We're going to carry on with the visuals as we see them now. Working on the scripts, working on the content. I have a few suggestions from some of the comments, which is amazing. But today we go back into it on episode 81, and it's the Wilson Memo. So picture the most powerful intelligence officer in the American military, a 3-star admiral, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, a man whose whole career was built on one skill: finding out who has what and what they mean to do with it. There is almost no door in the United States government that a man like that cannot open. Now picture him walking up to one particular door, holding out his credentials and being told, no, you are not on the list. You do not have a need to know. And if you keep pushing it, it's going to cost you your career. Well, that is the story at the heart of the document that leaked onto the internet in 2019. 15 pages of typed notes, a conversation that suddenly happened in the backseat of a car outside a private airport terminal in Las Vegas. This happened in October 2002. Now, the reason we're talking about it today is not that some anonymous account online said something wild. It is that the Admiral is real. The physicist who wrote the notes is real, and the meeting has a specific time and a specific place. And in 2022, a sitting member of Congress carried those notes onto the floor of the House and entered them into the permanent record of the United States legislature. It's called the Wilson Memo, and it is either the most important leak in the history of this subject or one of the most convincing pieces of fiction ever written. So let's try and work out what's what. Now, let me tell you why this single document grips people who take this field seriously. Most UFO claims are a smear of lie on a photo or a story with no name attached to it. Well, this is a whole different animal. It has the names you can look up. It has real careers, real clearances, real institutions. It has allegedly a trail that runs from a moonwalking astronaut's private files all the way to the floor of Congress. The researcher Richard Dolan called it the leak of the century, and he is not a man who reaches for that phrase casually. Whatever the memo turns out to be, it earned that the reaction by being specific in a field that is almost never specific. Same method as ever, 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the documented, true, whether you believe a word of the wider story or not. Tier 2 is the contested, where informed, honest people land on opposite sides. Tier 3, potentially all of our favourites, the speculative. The enormous claims laid out fully, but kept on the top shelf where they belong for now. And for the big Tier 3 claims, I will name the single thing that would drag each of them into the documented shelf. A claim you can test is worth 100 you cannot. So let's start with what's real. The 2 men in this story are not inventions. Admiral Thomas Wilson had one of the most serious jobs in American intelligence. In the late 1990s, he was the J2, the Director of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Then he rose to Director of Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the most senior intelligent posts in the entire military. Now hold on to what the J2 role means, because it is a hinge of the whole story. Black programs, the deepest, most tightly held secrets the Pentagon keeps, are supposed to fall under the office's oversight. Now, knowing what exists in these classified worlds was not a hobby for Wilson. It was the job he was paid to do. And to follow the story, you need to understand one phrase that sits in the middle of it: need to know. In the classified world, your rank does not automatically grant you access to a secret, neither does your clearance level. What grants access is a determination that you specifically need that information to do your job. It is the mechanism that keeps the deepest programs sealed, and the deepest of the deep are what we call the unacknowledged special access programs. programs whose existence is denied to almost everyone, including senior officials who would normally sit above them. Now, there is even an oversight body for those things, sometimes called the Senior Review Group, meant to make sure someone is accountable and is watching. Now, the chilling claim inside that Wilson memo is not that a program was secret. Secrets are pretty ordinary at this point. The claim is that the need-to-know wall was built so high that a 3-star admiral, the incoming head of the DIA, was standing on the wrong side of it. And that, when he appealed to see the oversight body, the wall held. Now, the other man is Dr. Eric Davis. Davis is a physicist who worked on a genuinely exotic government-adjacent research, advanced propulsion, wormholes, the far edge of what physics permits. Now, he was the chief science officer at a company called Earth Tech International, founded by another respected physicist, one we have spoken about a few times on this channel, Dr. Hal Puthoff. Now, we know his name surfaces again and again in serious research. These are not two strangers who met in the comment section. They are two men with real security clearances and real reputations to lose. I would argue Hal Puthoff might have some of the most tightly kept secrets the world has today. Now, the memo is Davis's written account of a meeting with Wilson on the 16th of October 2002. The specificity is the first thing that hits you. The notes put the meeting at roughly 10:10 in the morning, 10 minutes behind schedule, outside the so-called Janet Terminal at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, the discrete terminal run by the defense contractor EG&G that ferried workers out to classified sites in the Nevada desert, the airline with no public name that carries people to bases the government does not put on the map. Now, notice the choice of setting. If you wanted to fabricate a meeting about black programs, you would be hard-pressed to pick a more loaded backdrop than the exact terminal that shuttles people to the most secret real estate in the country. Now, to the believer, that fits a physicist who moved in those circles. To the skeptics, it reads like set dressing chosen for the effect. Now, both readings are fair, and the detail alone settles neither. 15 pages, dates, acronyms, named people, even little notes on Wilson's mood, his frustrations, his asides. If it is a forgery, it's a forgery built with the grain and texture of a genuine transcript. Now, the texture is not proof, but it is the real kind of detail a real record carries, and it deserves to be noticed rather than skipped. Now, the anchor that skeptics have the hardest time brushing aside. The memo says the whole affair began with a meeting in 1997 at the Pentagon between Wilson, the Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and the researcher Stephen Greer. And here is the striking part. Wilson, the same Wilson who spent years calling the document fiction, admits the meeting happened. He confirms he met Edgar Mitchell. He has said, in so many words, that the one accurate fact in the entire memo is that the Pentagon meeting happened. So, the starting gun of the story is an event even its fiercest deniers agreed took place. Now, the presence of Stephen Greer in that 1997 room cuts in both directions, and I can't pretend otherwise. Greer is the founder of the long-running disclosure movement, and to his supporters, he is a tireless truth seeker who has gathered hundreds of insider witness statements. To his critics, he is exactly the kind of figure whose involvement makes them reach for the salt, a man whose grander claims have often outrun the evidence. So when the memo's origin traces back to a meeting Greer helped arrange, a believer sees a serious insider briefing, and a skeptic sees the fingerprints of a movement with a habit of inflating things. Now, the meeting happened is tier 1. What was really said inside it is anyone's guess, and your read on Greer will colour which way you want to lean. Now, Edgar Mitchell is worth pausing on because his name is why the leak has a plausible home. Mitchell was the 6th human being to walk on the moon. He also, in his later life, an open and serious believer that the government was concealing knowledge of non-human contacts, and he pursued that brief through his own foundation and a wider circle of insider contacts. When he died in 2016, he left behind papers. The account of the Wilson Memo is that is sat among these very papers, and it leaked from his estate in 2019. A cabinet full of UFO researchers belonged to a moonwalker is exactly the kind of place a document like that could plausibly have lived. Now, that does not prove the path is real, but it's not a random claim either. And then comes a man named Oki Shannon. Shannon was a former special programs manager at Los Alamos, a serious national security figure in his own right, and his name appears inside the memo. When a journalist tracked him down and asked him directly, Shannon confirmed something remarkable. Admiral Wilson had telephoned him in around 1999 to ask about Eric Davis, to check his background and to ask whether the physicist could be trusted. Now think about what that gives us. A man named inside this supposedly fabricated document independently confirms that, in real life, the Admiral was quietly vetting the very physicist at the centre of it. Now, it's not proof that the car meeting happened, but it is a documented thread running straight out of the memo and into the real world. And the last piece of the flaw, the one thing that changes the whole weight of this, in 2022, during the first open congressional hearing on this subject in more than 50 years, Representative Mike Gallagher submitted the Wilson Memo into the Congressional Record. So whatever it is, leak, hoax, or something in the murky space between, it is now part of the official record of the United States Congress. That does not make its contents true. Entering a document into the record is not the government certifying it, but it lifts this permanently out of the realm following gossip. It is on the books, so there is our foundation. 2 real men with real clearances, a meeting with a fixed time and place, a 1997 Pentagon meeting, even the denier confirms, a plausible home for the leak in a moonwalker's estate, a named figure confirming that Admiral was vetting the author, and the whole thing lodged inside the Congressional Record. None of this tells you the program is real, but every piece of it is real. So now we climb into Tier 2, the contested, and this is where the real fight lives. And as ever, I want to give you both sides at full strength, because a lopsided version is no use to anyone. Now the central contested question is blunt. Did the conversations in the car actually happen the way the memo described? So let's take the case that it did. The specificity reads like a transcript, not an invention. The 1997 meeting checks out. The vetting call checks out. And this matters more than almost anything else. The man who supposedly wrote the notes, Eric Davis, has never denied writing them. Through the years of controversy, Davis has stayed nearly silent. He has not confirmed the memo. He has not disowned it. To many people, that silent roars. Now, if somebody published 15 pages of a fabricated notes document under your name describing a meeting you never attended, surely the natural human reflex is to say so at once, loudly and on the record. That's something he's never done. And there is documented reason his silence carries extra weight. In 2020, in the pages of the New York Times, Eric Davis went on the record saying he had given classified briefings to a Defense Department agency and to congressional staff about retrieval of vehicles that he described as not made on this earth. Read that again. The author of the memo, the very man at the center of the authenticity question, stated to one of the most serious newspapers in the world that he had personally briefed the government on recovered off-world craft. Now, that is not the memo. That is Davis under his own name in public years later making the same category of claim. It does not prove the car meeting happened, but it means the person who supposedly wrote those notes is demonstrably willing to say out loud that recovered non-human vehicles are real. His silence on the memo specifically becomes much harder to read as the silence of a man distances himself from a hoax. Supporters like the investigator George Knapp have stated plainly that they believe the document is authentic. Richard Dolan, as previously said, called it the leak of the century. Now the case against, and it is a strong one, so give it room to breathe. The man at the very centre, Admiral Wilson, has never wavered. He calls the memo fiction, not I can't discuss it, Not a careful no comment, straight up fiction. He told the journalist Billy Cox in plain language that it is all fiction. He has said he would not know Eric Davis if the man walked into the room right now. He says he never went on any crusade to break into a hidden program. His account is that yes, he met Edgar Mitchell at the Pentagon, and this is where the truth begins and ends. Everything else he says was invented. And when Wilson was asked why he didn't chase the program down, he gave an answer that sounds a lot like an ordinary busy man. He said he was buried in the real crisis of his day: Bosnia, Kosovo, Korea, Iraq, terrorism, with more than enough genuine black programs already on his plate. In his telling, he simply never went looking and never really followed up. And it gets sharper still. The memo names people who supposedly helped arrange the Wilson-Davis meeting, vouched for Davis, connected the men. What that same journalist contacted those names individuals, they said they didn't know Wilson, barely knew Davis, and would never have set up such a meeting. So you have named sources inside the document flatly contradicting the document. That's got to be a real crack, and it does not sand away easily. On top of that sits the provenance problem. Careful archives like the Black Vault have pointed out that the memo arrived with no chain of custody. It just simply appeared online in 2019. The estate story is plausible. Plausible is not verified. And without a documented path from the filing cabinet to the internet, you can't even be fully certain who typed the pages, let alone whether the words inside them are true. So what's it going to be? Notice how the contested question is layered. There is, did they meet? There is, did Wilson say these things? And there is, are these things he said true? Now you can believe the first and doubt the third without contradiction. The memo could easily be a genuine set of notes from a genuine meeting in which a frustrated admiral simply repeated rumours he himself could not confirm. It could be an embroidered write-up of a casual conversation, or it could be exactly what it appears to be. The honest position is that the outer layers carry some documented support, and the inner layer, the truth of the claims, carries none that the public can check. And that is why the memo sits in tier 2, whilst it contests sits in tier 3. Now, where do we go? The top shelf, the claims themselves. Everything from here comes from the memo or from the people echoing it, and none of it is confirmed. According to the notes, Wilson told Davis that after the 1997 Pentagon meeting, he went hunting for the cover-up that Mitchell and Greer swore had been running for decades. He says he found it. Not a rumour, but a specific program. A program managed not by a government agency, but a private aerospace corporation. A program built around recovered craft. A craft that the program's own people had concluded was not built by human hands. A craft they were trying to take apart and reproduce. Something, the note suggests, capable of operating in the air, in the sea, in space, and perhaps somewhere stranger than any of those. Now, the final detail is the strangest hinge in the whole document, and it deserves a hard look from both directions. A believer reads the argument to deny as the ring of truth. Of course, two careful men, one of them just handed a career-ending warning, would protect themselves that way. And of course, in the later denials are simply that the promise being kept. A skeptic reads the exact same line as the tell of a clever forger. A built-in explanation that converts every future denial into a secret proof, sealing the story so nothing can ever puncture it. One sentence, two completely opposite meanings, and no way from the text alone to know what we are looking for. Now that is the Wilson Memo in a miniature, a document engineered by accident or design so that the evidence for it and the evidence against it wear exactly the same face. And why is that? More than 20 years on, it refuses to resolve. Time has not settled it. It's only added layers. The people who could end it with a sentence have either denied everything, like Wilson, or said nothing at all, like Davis. The document itself sits in an archive with no proven past. What could still crack it open is narrow but real. A deathbed account from someone who was inside. a forced declassification under the new disclosure laws, or a single authenticated record surfacing from a program nobody was supposed to be able to name. Until one of those arrives, the memo stays exactly what it has always been, a locked box that rattles when you shake it, with no way to prove what's inside. So let's look closely at the shape of that claim, because it is the real payload. It is not, at its core, aliens are real. It's something colder and more political. It is that single most consequential object in human history might not be held by your elected government, but by a contractor your government hired. And that even the government's own top intelligence officers can be locked out of the room where it sits. That's a claim about power, and about who genuinely holds the keys, and whether anyone you vote for, or we vote for, is truly allowed near them. What could move it from tier 3 to tier 1? Well, one of three things. Eric Davis on the record confirming he wrote the notes and standing behind them, or the original document put through real forensic analysis, the typewriter, the paper, the dating, with a verified path out of Mitchell's estate, or the biggest of all, a single named official from inside such a program confirming on the record that it exists. Any one of those turns a story into evidence. Not one of them has happened yet, and the absence is precisely why an honest person keeps this claim on the top shelf, no matter how hard the memo's texture tugs back at them. There is a modern extension of all of this, and it is the reason the 2002 memo is not just a historical curiosity. The former Pentagon official, Louis Elizondo, in his book, revives the Wilson memo directly. He calls Davis one of the most honest men he's ever known, and he pushes past the memo. He names what he calls a legacy program and points at a short list of the largest defense contractors in the country, 9 of them, as a suspected custody of recovered craft. He frames the whole thing not as a space story, but as a threat to democracy itself. Private companies, he argues, holding more real power than the elected government that hired them. That is a serious person making a serious accusation in print under his own name. It is still, by every standard we use here, tier 3, an allegation, not proof. But it is a live wire, not a dead one. And it comes with its own test, the same as every big claim here. What would move the legacy program from allegations to fact? One named company on the record with a documented trail. A program name, a budget line, a contract number that ties recovered materials to a specific corporate route. Not a list of usual suspects, not a retired official's strongest hunch. One verifiable paper thread connecting one named contractor to one recovered object. That is the whole distance between an accusation and a case. And so far, the public holds the accusation and not the thread. But there is one more thread that keeps people awake, and it belongs in the contested to speculative space. In 2023, a former intelligence officer, David Grush, spoken about before, testified in Congress under oath that the United States possesses recovered non-human craft, and the effort is hidden inside private contractors and shielded from congressional oversight. Grush did not cite the Wilson memo. He may never have leaned on it at all, but the structure he described, contractors as custodians, extreme compartmentalization, oversight locked out, is the same skeleton the memo laid out more than 20 years earlier, and Grush was not simply an anonymous voice. Before he testified, his complaint was examined by the intelligence community's own Inspector General, who reportedly found his concerns credible and urgent enough to advance through the proper channels. That does not mean the Inspector General confirmed recovered craft. It means a formal watchdog judged the claim serious rather than frivolous. 2 accounts, decades apart, from very different men, pointing at the same architecture. Believers call that corroboration. Skeptics call it a sharp, shared story circulating in the same small world. Now, where each new witness has already absorbed the last one's claims, both readings are alive, and honestly, both can be argued by intelligent people. Christopher Mellon, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for Intelligence, has said much the same, that the scenario the memo described lines up with multiple sources who have told him privately. He stops short of confirming the document. He simply says it's consistent with what he has independently heard. Now there's ever the counter-narrative, and on a claim this size, the counter-narrative is not a courtesy. It is the backbone of being straight with you. Begin with the simplest, heaviest fact. The one man who actually knows, Thomas Wilson, says it's false. Not evasive, not I can neither confirm or deny, he just says it's fiction. He says he never chased any secret program and would not recognize Eric Davis if he was stood in a room with him. Believers have a ready reply. Of course he denies it. The memo itself says the two men agreed to deny the meeting. So denial is exactly what you'd expect. But be careful with that move, because it is a trap that can swallow every piece of evidence there is. If a denial counts as a secret confirmation, then no statement Wilson could ever make would count against the story. A claim that treats every possible piece of evidence, including a flat denial, as proof of it happening, well, that can never be wrong. That is not a strength, it's a warning light. Wilson's denial has to be allowed to actually carry weight, or the whole exercise stops being an investigation and quietly just becomes an act of faith. Second, there is no provenance. The document just appeared. That is nearly all we can say with certainty about how it reached us. The state account is plausible but unverified, and in any other field, a 15-page document of explosive claims with no established chain of custody would be filed as unconfirmed until proven otherwise. That is not skeptics being difficult for sport, that is simply the standard everyone should have. And the institution at the centre has answered in its own way. When claims like these have been put to it, the Pentagon's official position has been a broad denial. No verified evidence of recovered non-human craft, no confirmed reverse engineering program, nothing that survives its own review. Believers point out correctly that a denial from the very body accused of hiding something is close to worthless. But the reverse also holds. You can't treat the Pentagon's silence as damning and its denial as meaningless, as its every word is confirmation. At some point, the accusation has to expose itself to the possibility of being wrong, or it is not really an accusation at all. It is an article of belief wearing the costume of an investigation. Third, and this one genuinely wounds the believer's case, the people named in the memo as arranging the meeting have said they did no such thing, that they didn't know Wilson and would never have connected him to Davis. When a document's own supporting cast contradicts it, that's a structural crack, not a cosmetic one, and you just can't wave past that. Fourth, Wilson's own argument in his own logic. He said, in effect, that keeping something this enormous buried in the modern world is close to impossible, that if 9 major contractors were sitting on recovered craft, there would be dozens upon dozens of people positioned to leak it, and the secret would not have survived for decades. Now, that's not a foolish point. Enormous secrets tend to leak precisely because so many hands have to touch them. The believer's counter is compartmentalization, that no single person ever sees enough of the whole operation to blow it open. Both of them are reasonable, neither is proof, and that, once more, is tier 2 doing its honest work. So where does all of this leave us after 15 pages and years of arguments? The mistake people make with the Wilson memo is treating it as a light switch, on or off, true or fake, aliens or hoax. Because look at what survives even if you throw the aliens out completely. Let's strip away the recovered craft. Let's strip away the reverse engineering. Assume, for the sake of argument, that the exotic core is unproven and may stay that way forever. What remains is still a document sitting in the Congressional Record describing a scenario in which programs can be hidden from the very officials meant to oversee them, and in which private contractors can hold secrets a 3-star admiral cannot pry open. And whether or not that specific meeting happened, the structure it describes is real. Compartmentalization that locks out oversight is real. Contractors running deep black programs is real. The gap between what an elected official is allowed to know and permitted to know and what the classified world actually holds is real. That machine exists exactly as described, regardless of what sits inside this particular vault. And here is a detail that should make even a hardened skeptic pause. In 2023, Congress did not treat the contractor custody idea as a fantasy. It wrote law around it. The Defense Authorization Act of that year created formal legal channels for insiders to come forward about exactly these programs. And the proposed provision went further still, asserting the government's right to seize, under eminent domain, any recovered non-human technology held by private parties. Now think about that language and what it admits by simply existing. You do not write a law claiming the power to take back recovered craft from private companies unless a meaningful number of lawmakers take the possibility very serious. They are saying that private companies might be very well holding on to these crafts. The Wilson Memo, more than 20 years before, described precisely that scenario. Contractors as the custodians, the government locked out. Now, whether or not that memo is authentic, the fear it captured is now written into the statute books. That does not make the craft real, but it makes the anxiety official. So the memo matters on two levels, and they are worth keeping apart. On the sensational level, the recovered craft, the non-human origin, well, it's unproven. Resting on a document its own central figure calls fiction. And you've got to hold on to it precisely there. On the structural level, who can be shut out, who holds the keys, whether anyone who is elected genuinely is allowed to look, well, it points at something true no matter what happened outside that Las Vegas terminal. Here is the single thing that would end the debate. Not another podcast, not another retired official saying it sounds credible. Eric Davis on the record confirming or denying the notes he supposedly wrote. He has had years to do it. He has said nothing. And in the story built entirely on a document nobody can fully verify, the silence of the one man who could settle it in a sentence is itself the loudest sound in the room. The memo is in the record. The Admiral says it is fiction. The physicist says nothing at all. And somewhere inside that triangle is the truth. Still sitting behind a door, a 3-star Admiral, if the notes are real, was told he wasn't cleared to open. Now that is where the evidence stands, not where either side wishes it stood. Where it actually is. That was our quick recap and debrief of the Wilson Memo. I think to me it shows the same structure. Of course, compartmentalization happens. The military and military intelligence are incredible at it. We all fully expect denials on the record on these programs. As ever, if we've misinformed or misrepresented, please let us know. Any suggestions for future videos, please let us know. And let us know what you think about the Wilson Memo. Is it evidence for you? Do you class it as tier 1, 2, or 3? Thank you so much for watching. It has been a pleasure, and I will see you in episode 82 of Untold.